In the previous episode, I beat a mighty Dwarven kingdom. Today, however, I'll begin the path toward building an empire, but that path is blocked by a crisis. The greed crisis, and then another crisis, and another one. Yeah, there's quite a lot of them. Will I manage to conquer and unite the dwarves into one mighty empire that will dominate the Serpent Spine? See for yourself in this episode. Welcome, Imperialists, Lucas here. I begin this adventure by trying to deal with the Dwarven greed crisis, which is supposed to completely wreck my economy. Just look at these modifiers. Advisor costs are up by 75%. Meanwhile, tax income is down by 75%. Trade might as well not exist because trade efficiency is reduced by 75%. But I built such a powerful economy in the previous episode that I'm still making a profit. For now, because unfortunately that's actually bad news, the worst part of this crisis is the events as well as the cost of passing the reforms. And the stronger your economy is, the more expensive they become. My goal for the next few years is to complete every single one of those reforms. Thanks to my supporters, I know the correct order to take them in. But before I start passing those reforms, I need to give out the monopolies. In fact, I should have done that before the crisis even started, but it's too late now. So I grant every estate a 10-year privilege that increases my mercantilism, but also means I earn no income whatsoever from that type of trade good. And I do it for every single estate. Next, I recall all of my merchants to further weaken my trade income. I even make my home trade node transfer trade onward instead of collecting. If you have any policies that increase your income, disable them. If you have the option to divert trade from your vassal, turn it off. You want your economy to be running the biggest deficit possible. Now that I've achieved that, it's time to reduce some expenses because my deficit is actually a bit too large, and hire some cheap advisors. The reason is simple. Every event cost is calculated based on your total income. For example, before weakening my economy, I would have had to pay almost 6,000 for this reform. But after weakening it, the banking reform costs me just under 3,000. That won't hurt my budget nearly as much, but that's still not the real solution. The worst part is corruption. It increases the cost of everything, and even if I wanted to reduce it as much as possible, I simply can't. That's why I have to deal with corruption first because it's eating the country from the inside out. So at first, I actually increase it by printing more money. Yes, fight corruption by increasing it, but trust me, it actually makes perfect sense. You need to get it to level 15 as quickly as possible. Now I carry out the reform through an inspection, which is a bit expensive. And it worked. The corrupt officials have been removed. It took just under 2 years. But that's not the end of it, because now I have to enact this decision for 150 administrative power and 1,000 crowns. I lose 15 corruption, meaning all the corruption I currently have, but I also temporarily gain a government reform that removes a large portion of the crisis's negative effects. You can see it in the country modifiers. And if you want to check out the latest discounts and deals on ENEBA, the sponsor of this channel, make sure to look in the description of this video. You'll also find the links you need to use for those promotions to apply. I highly recommend it. Lucas. Next, I have to break up the Dwarven monopolies. One by one, all 3 of them. It'll take some time, and it won't come without additional costs. The textile monopoly is by far the worst. I lose 200 points of every monarch power. And that really hurts. But I managed to get through it, and there go another 150 points. Now it's time to deal with workers' rights, so I'll have workers instead of slaves. This is where I choose the permanent modifier I'll keep for the rest of the campaign. I can go with fair wages, which gives bonuses to tax income, but penalties to production efficiency. The other option permanently reduces national unrest, but at the cost of 10% goods produced. And honestly, national unrest is almost always the better choice, so that's the path I'm taking. Although personally I'm not exactly a fan of labor unions, that said, I have to admit that goods produced modifier is one of the strongest production modifiers in the game, so it's usually worth maximizing. There go another few thousand crowns, another 150 administrative power, and even more money. Now it's finally time to deal with the banks. And this might surprise you, I won't spend a single crown on this reform because I'll use stability instead. Let the banks collect those debts again. Now I can reassign all of my merchants to either steer trade, toward my home node, or collect elsewhere to increase my income. In the meantime, I even got a gold rush, so extra gold is always welcome. During the banking reform, the dwarves take to the streets because they want their money back. They're not getting a single crown from me. I pay for every event with stability instead, and that leads to a massive rebellion. Luckily, I have an army that can convince the revolutionaries they're better off without that money. Oh, that's a nice surprise, I got a free dig level in this hold. Despite all the difficulties, I managed to restore a properly functioning banking system. Yes, it cost me more administrative points, and another 1,000 crowns. But in return, I lose a significant amount of inflation. And that interest rate, wow! Finally, I leave the limitation of Dwarven greed for last. Just like the monopolies, it's split into several parts and now I complete every single one of them. Meanwhile, after 10 years, I revoke all of the monopoly privileges, they're no longer useful to me. And there we go, the great reform has been completed successfully. At the same time, I fulfill every requirement to end this disaster. And now I get these bonuses for 100 years. Development cost is reduced by 10% across the board. But even better, innovativeness gain is increased by another 50%. Prestige, stability, wow. Well, unless I go bankrupt. Fortunately, that's not part of the plan. Although I wouldn't exactly say my dwarves came out of all this any stronger. Because honestly, I forgot that I had to manually revoke those monopolies afterward. And of course, I revoked the worst and most important ones. Still, after 12 years, I finally managed to overcome these brutal dwarven crises. Now it's time to consolidate the region and finally become a hegemon, which will unlock the next part of my mission tree. I start by enacting my policies to boost my trade efficiency. At the same time, I declare war on the goblins, because it's finally time to wipe them out for good. Even better, I was integrating my vassal at the same time, so I can finally incorporate all of their lands and profit from them even more. A whole series of new expeditions and dangers has also appeared, so I'll be dealing with them one by one. For that, I'll be using mercenaries, which will also give me additional manpower if the expedition returns successfully. Assuming it comes back at all, because they don't always make it home. I also restore my council, which I'll now gradually strengthen. Overall, I'm juggling a lot of things at once. And after conquering the last goblin territories, I recovered another jewel for the Dwarven crown. I now have 2 of them. I also need to wait for prosperity to increase, because it'll provide a whole range of valuable bonuses. At long last, I start building my first manufactories. As you can see, they'll give my economy a massive boost. On top of that, manufactories are incredibly powerful because they increase both production and trade income. I'm even planning to take out loans to build them, then I'll pay those loans back as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, just as I was getting back on my feet and my income was approaching what it had been before the crisis, this happened. My queen died. I suppose it's not that surprising, she lived to the age of 240. I don't know, is that old for a dwarf? May she rest in peace. She leaves behind an unpolished diamond in the form of our current kingdom, and the mourning period for the queen will last 5 years. Right after her death, one of my expeditions returned, carrying some rather valuable artifacts. As any proper dwarf would, I sold every single one of them. Meanwhile, besides constructing manufactories, I also began expanding my gold mines. After 5 years of mourning, the heir managed to overcome the many challenges that stood in his way, in a rather clever manner too. More importantly, he managed to preserve the continuity of the crown and calm the internal disputes among the dwarves. So now, the dwarves can finally move forward again. All that's left is to restore the hold of Gorburad and further strengthen my capital. Restoring the hold of Gorburad was a major milestone on the road to building my empire. It'll make constructing everything else throughout the empire much easier. Too bad I just spent thousands of gold on manufactories. Oh well, nothing I can do about that now. But I've officially stepped onto the path toward hegemony. If I hadn't already conquered everything, I'd now receive permanent claims over this entire region as well. I also decided to send my armies to reclaim another hold that had previously fallen into the hands of an orc tribe posing a serious threat. I have to drive those greenskins out of the tunnels. The campaign went so well that I even decided to push down into the valley and seize the most important settlements there. But then the orcs began gathering in the north, so I united both of my armies and marched into battle, where the dwarves' superior quality was immediately obvious. I slaughtered the enemy. I even managed to reach the orc capital. What a filthy hole in the ground. Although it did have plenty of gold, I have to admit though, moving through those lands made me rather uneasy, because I never knew what I might run into next. I looted the orc capital and burned it to the ground. In the end, I recovered every territory I wanted and extracted an enormous tribute. The bad news was that in the meantime, the hold of Verkal Kozenad had fallen into the hands of the Black Orcs, and it contained buildings that were incredibly important to the dwarves. With the money I had acquired, I also decided to launch a major project, the centralized development of all my holds. Thanks to that, I can now dig deeper in every single hold. Yes, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but until now I could only expand my capital. More importantly though, I now have to repair my hold, which suffered several disasters during its previous expansion, including a gas explosion. Unfortunately, that reduced its development, so now I have to make up for it. Thankfully, it won't be too expensive. It also allowed me to embrace the printing press in the hold. After all of that, the time has finally come to restore Dwarven hegemony across the region. So here's where I stand. I have repaired my economy, and now I need to secure my alliances with the humans, as well as several key holds that will be essential for my future conquests. First, I spent quite a while studying the entire new mission tree. It turned out that I actually had to spend a few years waiting for my newly conquered holds to be repaired. But not only that, because on the right side of the tree, there are several missions that can be completed very quickly. And they'll give me some valuable bonuses that I can put to good use right now. For example, a cheaper advisor, all because I insulted the dwarves of the Ruby Hold. That flavor text is absolutely savage. These are the dwarves who left the Serpent Spine long ago, and instead of helping us reclaim it, they chose to live and prosper among humans. Time to pick my fourth idea group. Yeah, that's always a tough choice, because I have plenty of interesting options. I could start investing in mercenary ideas because they're always a solid pick, but honestly, whenever I take them, I feel like I'm cheating, they're just that powerful. Economic ideas would also be excellent since they'd increase my army's discipline, while also giving me a whole host of powerful economic bonuses. But my economy is already doing just fine. I would mainly pick tolerance ideas because they reduce separatism, and unfortunately that's exactly what's stopping me from developing my newly conquered holds. You can't change a province's culture while it still has separatism. And by default you have to wait around 30 years for it to disappear. Then there are offensive ideas, which provide a whole range of bonuses for generals, which is always extremely important, as well as extra discipline, better siege ability and a higher force limit. So many great choices, but in the end I decided to go with offensive ideas because I need better generals. Honestly, that's my biggest weakness right now. After that, I focused on completing missions that grant specific bonuses, allowing me to build manufactories practically everywhere at a very low cost, which is exactly what I do. Now, when it comes to holds, I can literally build every building I want, so that's exactly what I do. In tunnels, I usually build 3 structures. A manufactory, a building that increases force limit or manpower, and courthouses. If the building limit allows it, I'll also add workshops. And that's basically it. Sometimes, if a province exceeds 15 development, I'll use expand infrastructure. And also start building manpower manufactories there, but that's something I'll do later on. I also like converting culture, but only in this particular region, so it becomes the heartland of the Diamond Dwarves. It's not especially efficient, especially since I'll probably accept every Dwarven culture once I become an empire. Still, I really like the primary culture bonus of minus 10% development cost, since one of my future missions requires me to gain a trade monopoly on crystal production, which will be extremely difficult if crystal prices fall too low. I enact the development edict and start developing those provinces. Specifically, I develop them to 10 first and only afterward to 15. I use only diplomatic points at first and then military points alongside it. And after all that development, I can finally become an empire. That also coincides with unlocking administrative technology 15. Way ahead of time, seriously way ahead. But when I'm not conquering anything, I honestly have nothing else to spend administrative points on. I think it's worth it though, because now I can build manpower manufactories everywhere. Although I just realized I made a mistake. I have some mushroom provinces here that provide a much bigger manpower bonus, so unfortunately I'm going to demolish the manufactories I built there and replace them with manpower ones instead. After all of my recent development, I finally achieved a monopoly on gem production. It doesn't actually give me anything yet though, because I still have to repair my hold. Normally I'd be thrilled about this event because it spawned a new, extremely rare magical resource. It would replace my current resource with this one here, which I believe is worth around 10 gold per unit, practically doubling this hold's income. But this is my capital, and a huge number of my missions require me to keep developing it over and over again. So unfortunately, I have to decline it. It hurts my dwarven heart, which would really love to have even more money. I also invaded those weak dwarves who owned the neighboring holds. It turned out they had regained their independence, but they couldn't even raise an army to defend themselves against my invasion. They were simply too weak to be allowed to survive. Meanwhile, I secured the crossroads. Finally, I also introduced the bright ideas, which means my dwarves now embed rune-encrusted diamonds into their armor. As a result, my army is going to shine like, well, you know. More importantly, I gain these incredible military bonuses for the rest of the game. The extra morale damage will let me shatter enemy armies with ease. Oh, and I also gain a ton of innovativeness. I'm already sitting at almost 100%. Honestly though, this mission made me laugh a little, because judging by the description, I'm literally making diamond armor diamond pickaxes and everything else. At this point, my dwarves are starting to look like Minecraft characters. And when I completed the mission to study the crown jewels, I have to admit I was surprised by just how intensive those studies were, because I received a penalty to all monarch points for 3 years. I used that time to increase my mercantilism to 30%. That allowed me to become a true monopolist on the road toward luxury and glass made from our diamonds. Wow, I instantly received manufactories, they don't even have to be built. My next goal was to develop every coal province to 10 development. And developing this cave triggered an incredibly powerful event. I can turn it into either the Empire's new industrial center or a military center. That would strengthen my armies even further. Considering this province will produce coal, I am definitely turning it into an industrial center. After completing the intensive research on the crown, I began the process of experimental resource extraction. Those experiments are so intensive that they massively increase the cost of everything. After completing these 2 economic missions and all the work related to gems, I gained a powerful privilege. That gave my income an enormous boost. I used all the wealth pouring into my treasury to improve relations with the human kingdoms. And once I had done that within the Empire, the next step was winning over the human realms around Lorient, effectively cutting off the dwarfs of the Ruby Hold diplomatically. After some time and several thousand gold, I managed to do exactly that. In the end, thanks to my diplomatic efforts, I established a monopoly on the human markets. That grants me a rather nice privilege. It's actually a very powerful one, giving me an additional merchant as well as increased global trade power. It also boosts production efficiency in provinces producing gems, and I absolutely crushed the Ruby Hold's economy. Thanks to development and my missions, I essentially doubled my kingdom's income. I also secured positive relations with the human kingdoms. I built up my army and secured the heart of the Serpent Spine. Now I'm finally ready to move on to the next stage, where I can begin conquering both the north and the south. That's literally where my mission tree is leading me, conquer the south and the north, and my first strike will be aimed at the north, because that's where the ancient Dwarven capital lies. It's where all the major trade routes through the Serpent Spine converge, which makes it the most important trade hub in the region. This first war isn't particularly difficult. Even though the orcs had the advantage in numbers and better general, my army's superior quality was so overwhelming that they never stood a chance. And even though I reached the ancient Dwarven capital and managed to occupy it, I still had to settle for a fairly modest conquest in the first war. Meanwhile, while I was integrating my newly conquered lands into the empire, I decided to attack another hold, this time in the south. This war, on the other hand, is quick and ends with major territorial gains. And I think I just killed a dragon. Isn't there actually a playable nation in this game that's ruled by a dragon? Judging by the event text, I think it's some kind of Tolkien reference. Time to get rid of all this dragon treasure. After these conquests, it also became possible to restore the ancient Dwarven railway. I immediately started the project, so my armies could move quickly along these routes. From what I can see, the railway is repaired section by section throughout the entire Dwarven railroad. The whole process takes a little over 2 years. The restored tracks provide incredible bonuses, especially by reducing the governing cost of the connected provinces. And of course, my armies can move much faster as well. I also established relations with the humans who had settled in one of our holds. My goal was to diplomatically bring it under my control instead of starting a major conflict with my neighbors. And a few months later, I succeeded. After that, I launched yet another massive wave of manufactory construction. And just as I was about to continue my conquest, this happened. Another crisis, the Goblin Tide, or something like that. The very first assault marched straight into my capital and looted it. So unfortunately, I got caught off guard once again. That's why I'm wiping out these rebellions without mercy. Unfortunately, that was only the beginning. This crisis comes in several waves. And to make matters worse, I also suffer a minus 20% production efficiency penalty. The objective of this disaster is to seal a series of gates leading into the goblins' underground tunnels. To do that, I have to destroy every goblin nest marked on the map. Closing a goblin nest is actually simple, I just move an army onto it and activate the decision. That immediately spawns an enemy army, and once I defeat it, the goblin nest modifier disappears from the province. Unfortunately, I was then hit by a massive goblin wave, and even though my troops weren't prepared, they still managed to defend the capital. Yeah, I forgot to assign a general here. Thankfully, I quickly sent reinforcements and crushed the Goblin Tide, earning some incredible military bonuses in the process. And I'll use those bonuses to conquer even more orc provinces. After restoring the hold of Gorvazumbrog, I discovered a chamber of secrets hidden inside it. I wonder what I'll find there. Honestly, it was only then that I realized just how powerful the monument in this hold really is. I definitely have to build it. A little later, I opened the chamber, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what I actually got from it. Let me know in the comments what exactly I received here. But getting back to the war, which was mostly uneventful, I can take quite a lot of land. My main objective is the ancient Dwarven capital, but I'll also expand my realm by taking more tunnels and the holds connected to them. I wasn't particularly worried about who might join a coalition against me. After all, I'm playing dwarves, and I already have a pretty formidable army. Not long afterward, I unlocked universities, and I'm literally building them everywhere now. Since I'm already approaching the monarch point cap, I'm about to spend a lot of time developing provinces, and universities will significantly reduce those development costs. As for Amaldir and the surrounding holds, they're unfortunately in pretty rough shape. But on the other hand, they're home to some incredibly powerful monuments. And not just in the capital hold, but all across the surrounding region. I have a feeling the halls of the ancestors might solve both my manpower problem and my culture conversion costs. The assembly hall not only increases productivity, but also unlocks the ability to create client states. Well, if I were planning to conquer the entire world of Anbennar, I'd be very happy about that right now. And the capital itself increases my maximum absolutism, letting me conquer even more land. In the far north, I also captured another hold, Arg Ordstun, the one I mentioned in the previous episode, which is also incredibly powerful from a military standpoint. After that, I'll capture the Bank of Asra as well. Now, after all these conquests, it's finally time for an enormous round of development. Just look at this, 4 development for only 14 or 18 level. Development is incredibly cheap, so I'm going to be doing a lot of it. Whenever I acquire new provinces, I only create states around holds. Holds are simply too important not to do that. Oh, and I also make states out of provinces with gold and mithril. Unfortunately, I have to repair every single hold first. And that's going to take quite a while. Without restored holds, I can't really progress through my mission tree, because most missions require them. And I'm not even going to mention culture conversion. There's absolutely no chance I'm accepting Orcish culture. Anyway, after my armies had secured and pacified the north, it was finally time for the Great Southern War, because another Dwarven kingdom stands in my way, claiming the right to restore the empire. Unfortunately, the Golden Dwarves have strayed from the true faith. Even worse, they formed alliances with other races, and it's obvious these are soft dwarves because I captured the war goal almost immediately, the hold of Hehodovar, home to the School of Architecture. It's actually strange, the Golden Dwarves keep retreating with barely a fight, handing over one fortress after another. Turns out they weren't retreating after all, they were attacking from behind. Sneaky bastards! It didn't help them anyway, because now I'm assaulting their capital and taking a pretty sizable chunk of their territory. And that's how I discovered yet another Dwarven hold that I'll soon conquer as well. After securing the north, I receive permanent claims over the entire region, but much more importantly, I move my main trade node to the ancient capital. I'm not moving my actual capital there just yet. And now I can finally put all of my merchants to work, I just didn't feel the need to earlier. I know it's probably not perfectly optimized, but I'm still making an absolute fortune. Well, maybe not quite as much as I expected. But after the changes, things are much better. I'm collecting over 150 gold from trade alone. Later, after conquering the last land still held by the northern Orc tribes, I recovered yet another crown jewel. At this point, I'm basically the master of every crown jewel, because they all belong to me now. A new diamond decree. There's a lot of lore here. But in short, it tells us that the diamond dwarves have come a very long way, learned from the mistakes of the past, and now seek to forge a single mighty Dwarven Empire under the supreme rule of my hold, instead of the old system, where it was merely a kingdom of cooperating Dwarven holds. As a result, my empire is also renamed. We abandon the name Arg Ordstun and adopt the name Imperium Shetur Ordstunov, the Shining House of Jewels. It grants me a huge number of permanent claims, which is great because it means even more conquest and also increases my maximum absolutism. But more importantly, I finally have the foundation for a pretty impressive name. I've also entered the Age of Witch Kings. So here's where we stand. The railway has been fully restored. Major conquests have been achieved and my armies have grown even stronger. The ancient capital has been reclaimed and is now being rebuilt, which means I can finally move on to the next stage, the final finishing touches before what's to come. With only the final few finishing touches left before completing the entire mission tree, I begin by burning down and destroying the old capital, completely severing my ties with the past. Yeah, the devastation here is pretty painful. But there's nothing I can do about it right now, because a major and difficult war against Grombar lies ahead. They still control several provinces that rightfully belong to me. Even worse, their ally, the Counts League, also owns a few locations that I need to conquer. Surprisingly, our forces are actually quite evenly matched. I begin by sending my armies toward the League, because I want to knock them out of the war as quickly as possible. And thanks to the tunnel I built connecting my lands to the human hold, which I'm already in the process of annexing, I can attack from 3 different directions. Meanwhile, I'm also reviewing all of my missions. Unfortunately, many of them require me to restore and upgrade my holds to at least level 4 or 5, so it's worth working on that in the meantime. Grombar's armies may be numerous, but they're certainly commanded worse than mine, and their army composition and overall quality are far inferior, so I crush them without much trouble. I keep stack wiping them one army after another. During this war, I'll also make use of battle magic, giving me a bit of extra luck on the dice rolls. Now I'm even crushing armies of similar size. After a year of war, half of the Counts League was under my occupation, allowing me to demand major territorial concessions and take essentially everything I wanted. I even managed to reach the Orc capital. No, it's actually over here. Well, now I've reached it. In the end, I conquered everything I wanted in this war, and even a little more, taking a few extra provinces to establish a land connection with the dwarves in the north. Unfortunately, they're still too large to join me peacefully. Although that mithril mine of theirs is looking incredibly tempting, after this war, I have to admit it was absolutely worth it, because I now have 100% control over the most important region in the game. Now my eyes turn south toward the Golden Dwarves, where this time my objective is to capture their capital. Unfortunately, they are allied with the elves, who are a fairly powerful opponent, so I'll deal with them first. My goal is to knock the elves out of the war as quickly as possible, because they're definitely the more dangerous enemy. Or are they actually elves? They are elves, or aren't they? Never mind. I was tempted to conquer this entire valley just to make my borders look nicer, but maybe another time. For now, a white piece is good enough. Unfortunately, I didn't get everything I wanted in this war, but I did firmly bring the Golden Citadel under my control. After conquering and integrating the Golden Hold, I was also able to proclaim myself the economic hegemon. Yep, that means I've surpassed 1000 total income and I'm making almost 700 gold in pure profit. At this point, I honestly have more money than I know what to do with, so I start upgrading every monument I possibly can. After another dozen or so years, all that's really left is to wait for every hole to finish upgrading. Although I have to admit, there's also another mission that I simply don't understand, and I think it's going to block my further progress. I've even started gaining 70 absolutism as the dwarves. I just need to change a few government reforms and at the very end revoke a couple more guild privileges. And with that, the entire Serpent Spine has essentially been conquered. I have an incredibly powerful economy and an incredibly powerful army, both in terms of quantity and quality. But now I'm facing about 30 years of waiting for all these upgrades to finish, and I honestly think this mission is bugged, or I just have no idea how to complete it. Either way, let me know in the comments which other Anbennar nation or adventure you'd like to see me play next, and whether you'd like to see more Anbennar on the channel at all. While you're waiting, you can pass the time by watching my Sweden campaign, where I turned the Baltic Sea into a Swedish lake.